and used to attend a lot of his halaqat and lectures growing up. And he doesn't know that, but he's someone who really motivated and encouraged and inspired a generation of young people growing up in New York to take their religion seriously, to study, and also to be a confident Muslim. And of course, we talk about this a lot, that, you know, the confidence with which true faith inspires in all of us is something contagious, right? I talk at length about the fact that I've had the blessing and privilege of having many good teachers and mentors, but the best mentors I had were my peers, older brothers and sisters who I looked up to, and one day wanted to follow their path. And so, with the risk of possibly embarrassing the Sheikh, he's one of those people that I've looked up to for a long time, and it's a blessing and pleasure to have him here. In a second, we'll officially introduce him for the program, but this topic is extremely important, as Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tells us that the way that we should worship Allah and ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tarahu, that you worship Allah as though you see Him. As though you see Him. We find multiple reports of companions saying that when we were in the presence of Rasulullah والسلام, that it was as though we could see Jannah and Jahannam in front of us. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ, if you cannot see God, which is the case for all humans, فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, then live your life as though you are aware and cognizant of the fact that He sees you. That level of conviction, that level of yaqeen, that level of confidence doesn't occur by accident. It's taught. It's learned. Al-ilmu bit-ta'allum. Knowledge is learned. It can be inculcated. It can be imbibed in someone who is willing to put in the work. And the steps to becoming a more confident believer, a more cognizant and appreciative Muslim, starts with gatherings like this from the advice of our dear Shaykh. So our education director, inshallah, is going to officially welcome him and get this program started. Our iqamah for Isha is going to be at 8:30. So inshallah, the plan is still to keep the lecture until then, and then Q&A thereafter. Correct? All right. Musab, you can take it away, and then Jazakallah khairan, barakallah fikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm not going to give the full background for Sheikh Kamal al-Makki. If you want to know the full background, just Google him. You'll see a lot of videos on YouTube. You'll see a lot of information. But one sentence that strikes out, Sheikh Kamal al-Makki, his nickname is the Black Belt of Dawah. That's why he's here today, to talk about the confident Muslim. He has like decades and decades of experience in studying Dawah and Seerah. How old am I? Decades and decades, yeah. Alhamdulillah. So today the topic is going to be the confident Muslim, on how to answer questions about Islam. Could be simple, it could be hard. He's going to give a short lecture first, and then after Isha, if you guys have specific questions you want to go over, then we'll go over those, inshallah.
By the way, y'all think I'm old. He's my older brother. Just to give you an idea, all right? So it's not yet. One for every semester I'm here.
And if any of you guys are from Houston, he is a resident scholar at Click, and he's also an instructor at Al-Maghrib Institute. So you guys might see him there. All right, Sheikh Kamal al-Makki, Jazakallah khair.
All right, Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Ameen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. You know, on the note of white hairs, Sheikh, I used to live in Islamabad like for 5 years. This was a long time ago when we were little kids, you know. So I remember a lot of things, but from television, I specifically remember this one commercial. Kala Cola. It was a dye, a black dye for white hairs and stuff. So either the Sheikh is young or there's some Kala Cola happening over there. All right, Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. Thank you for coming. Yes, we're talking about the confident Muslim, and we're going to talk about answering questions, whatever they are, about Islam. But before that, let's agree on and establish some kind of some guidelines here. First, I want to start by saying everybody wants a piece of the Muslim today. True? The atheist wants a piece of you. The Christian wants to get at you. The Jew wants to get at you. Those who are secular, call themselves progressives, but they're regressive. Everybody wants a part of you. And so you have to be able to fend people off from every angle and from every direction. Which always brings to mind this description of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. They described him, there are many great things about his description and his biography, but this one really is so powerful. They said that whenever he spoke about a topic, you felt that he spent his whole life preparing this one topic. Like he's just researching this one thing. That's why he's so good at it. Then the next day he speaks about a completely different topic, and you get the same feeling as if he spent his whole life just working on this one topic. So, obviously, I don't know if we're going to get to that level, but you should be able to respond to questions no matter which side they come from. So, we're talking about the confident Muslim. And confident meaning they don't have doubt in their deen. And I need to clarify something about doubt here. The scholars say there are two kinds of doubt. There's that serious doubt. Someone has serious doubt, they leave Islam. Serious doubt, they take off their hijab. Serious doubt, they stop praying. And then there is fleeting doubt. Doubt that's just passing by very quickly. A lot of people experience the second type. Just an idea that passes by your head very quickly. What if there isn't a God? What if the Quran was man-made? What if there are mistakes and whatever it is, right? And some people allow this fleeting or passing doubt to become a big deal. But if you understand what it is, you just ignore it. Just ignore it. Basically, the companions came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, we sometimes get these thoughts about Allah, about Islam, about the Prophet. We get these thoughts sometimes that we would rather fall from the furthest star all the way to earth. That's a long fall. Than to speak of these things. Any bad ideas, bad, maybe whatever it is, something bad about Allah, you think something nasty about Allah or whatever it is. We would rather fall to our death than to even speak of these things. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوجدتموه? Did you really find that? You really get these thoughts every now and then? They said yes. He said ذاك صريح الإيمان. That is exactly what Iman is. That is exactly what Iman is. What does that mean? Having these bad fleeting thoughts, passing thoughts about Allah or Islam, that's what Iman is? So the scholars explained, they said, if there is an abandoned warehouse, and then a warehouse loaded with goodies, okay? Maybe it's an Amazon Prime warehouse. I don't know. The point is, this one is known to be an abandoned warehouse. There's nothing inside it. Which one would the thief break into? The Amazon warehouse. He wouldn't break into the abandoned warehouse. And the thief here is the shaitan. The shaitan is not going to come to someone who has no iman and say, oh my God, I think you have no iman. The guy's going to be like, yeah. Duh. He's going to go to the person with the iman. The warehouse is loaded with good stuff and say, hey, I really think you may not be a Muslim. And your job is just to say, get out of my face, get out of here. But that's it, done. So the fact that you get these thoughts is proof that you're true believers. Because the shaitan doesn't try to give these thoughts to an unbeliever. Does the shaitan go to the atheist and say, there is no God? He goes to the Muslim and says, there is no God. And the Muslim says, oh my God. Starts panicking. Don't panic. Because it's normal. Like this girl, when I was chaplain of George Mason MSA, she came to me. And she's one of our best du'at. Like she's crazy active da'iyah. And she's always in her jilbab and very active with MSA. She comes crying. She's like, sometimes I think, what if I'm not Muslim? What if I really don't believe in Allah? And what if I'm not a Muslim? She starts crying. And I'm trying to be nice here. But deep down I want to tell her, what's the matter with you? Like, if you didn't believe in Allah, why are you in jilbab and hijab and you just prayed Maghrib with us? Like, you're a weird unbeliever then. Here praying Maghrib, like, I don't believe any of this. Well, Allahu Akbar. Why are you here? And why are you crying if you don't care about Islam? Doesn't that tell you that you're all right? And so I'll conclude with this. Again, do not worry about passing doubt. Just a quick thought that comes. What if Islam is not the truth? What if the Christians will go to Jannah? Or what if the Quran is written by other than Allah Azza wa Jal? What if a devil dictated the Quran to the companion or the Prophet or whatever? All these thoughts just running past your head like this. A man came to Abdullah Ibn Abbas. As you know, Ibn Abbas is one of the great scholars, and now he's one of the few living scholars from the companions at that time. So a man comes to him, he says, Ya Ibn Abbas, what's that thing, ajidu fi sadri? What is this thing I find in my chest? So now he's coming to Ibn Abbas with a problem. So what's that thing I find in my chest? So Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, sorry. So he tells him, what is it? Let me help you. Look, what is it? He says, Wallahi, I won't talk about it. Like, how do you help someone like that? I need to consult with you on an issue. Like, sure, go ahead. Like, Wallahi, I'm not going to talk about it. So Ibn Abbas understood immediately. And he smiled. He said, Ashay'un min shak? Is it an issue of doubt? And the man said, yes. So Ibn Abbas said, no one's ever been free. Ma naja min dhalika ahada. No one's ever been free of that. And he just laughed. So that means the shaitan, he makes these attempts. He tries. So he'll come to you and he'll just quickly cast this quick doubt in your mind, or just throw a question into your head. Your job is to quickly ignore it. And when the shaitan sees that, he moves on to the next customer. And if they throw it and ignore it, he moves on to the next one. But the person who latches onto it and starts wondering and pondering and crying is like, oh, I've got a customer. Just like with wudu and waswasa. He's come to everybody and said, I think you just ruined your wudu. And most people are like, get out of here. They just go and go pray. But one guy said, you know what? I think you're right. Thank you. And he repeated the wudu. He's like, I've got a customer. And every time you make wudu, he comes back to you. Asma, I think you just ruined your wudu. Okay, I think you're right. And you repeat it again. I think you just ruined your wudu. I think you're right. And you repeat it again. You get the idea? I've seen people, they gave up salah. They stopped praying. So I make wudu 20, 25 times. And every time I start the salah, I go back again. Yeah, you let the shaitan get to that point. Anyways, so I hope we're clear the difference between real doubt where someone leaves a deen and just a thought that passes by your head. And you ignore it and you move on. So the confident Muslim, the reason I'm getting into that is the confident Muslim is not the one who never gets a thought or two or a question or two. That's just what the shaitan does. The confident Muslim is the one who still remains firm. They get a question, but they still go to salah. They get a question, they got their hijab on. They got a question, but they don't get Gillette Mach 3 and remove their beard. All right. So, now with that, let's understand a couple of things. We have, there's some questions that are, or philosophical questions that are philosophically different between the West and the Muslim world. So for example, the sources of knowledge. And just for brevity of time, I'm not going to ask you what are the sources of knowledge. Usually I ask that question, then I get books. Like, no. Where they get that knowledge to put in the book? Then experiments. No, that's a methodology of attaining knowledge. What are the sources? Any knowledge you learn, it has to be from somewhere. For the Westerners, there's one source, and that is the universe. And that's kind of true. Anything you learn will have to be from this universe. Even if you learn something from Jupiter, it's still within the universe. No, I have personal classes with Iblis. He's still from this universe. He's still from the universe, right? So they're saying all of knowledge will be from the universe, and you get it from different ways. Sometimes by observing planetary bodies, whatever it is, how gases react, observing how animals behave or how humans behave, by experimenting, by whatever. It's going to be from within this universe. So for the West, there is one source of knowledge. But for the Muslims, we have two sources of knowledge. All right? And that gives us an advantage and an edge. The two sources of knowledge. Number one, the universe. Number two, revelation. Al-Wahi. The Quran and the Sunnah. Some scholars break it up into direct revelation and indirect revelation. Direct revelation being the Quran, indirect being the Sunnah. But the point is that we have a secondary source of knowledge. And we take from both. We take from both. Because philosophically, and I know most of us, we don't study the philosophy behind the science. We just study science. Chemistry, physics, math. But every science has a philosophy behind it. And philosophically, science is atheistic and materialistic. Meaning, the answer has to be something material. Like, that can be observed or is actually real or physical and materialistic in that sense. And atheistic, not that science denies God's existence, but in the textbook, they don't refer to God. When you're reading about embryology and how do muscle cells know to go to skeletal muscle? How does cardiac muscle know to go to the heart? How do tissues, the hair knows to go to this area? How do the book doesn't say, well, God sends them in that direction. So it's atheistic in the sense that it does not refer to God as the explanation, which is fair enough. And if the book just says, well, we don't understand how it works, God does it that way, fine. Just say we don't understand how it works. So it's atheistic in that sense, that they don't refer to God as the explanation or the answer. It's materialistic, and the answer has to be something material or something that can be measured, identified, like that. Philosophically, and that's why there is nothing unscientific about believing in God. And I want to explain how this whole thing doesn't make any sense anyways. But let's first finish our sources. So we've got two sources. As a Muslim, I've got two sources. I've got the world, the universe around us, and I've got revelation, direct or indirect, meaning the Quran and the Sunnah. And to try to use the universe or science, what is science? It's a way of understanding the world or universe, if you want. Science is a way of understanding and making sense of the world. So how are you going to use science to prove something that's from the next world? How do you use the knowledge of understanding the world to explain something in the world of the unseen or the next world? Doesn't make any sense. And that's why when people give knowledge too much power, that doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times people don't understand what the word scientific is. We just use it a lot. I saw this short video. I forgot what the question was, but it was something that had nothing to do with science. The guy asked the sheikh, what is this? And then can you prove it scientifically? Look, imagine I ask you, what year were your parents married? And can you prove that scientifically? If I said that to you, you'd be like, oh, this guy's just a fool. He doesn't know what science is, but he's trying to sound smart by using big words. Scientifically, elephant, hippopotamus. That's all it is. Trying to sound smart. Because there's nothing scientific about proving what year my parents were born. What do you mean scientifically? You want to see a certificate? I don't even like you enough to go dig through my paperwork to show you a certificate. Anyways, so you cannot use the knowledge of the way of understanding the world to explain something outside of this world. So you have one source of knowledge, the universe. How can you use that and or science to prove to me that if I give $10 in sadaqah, how can you set up an experiment to prove that that will be multiplied by 10, and then by 7, and then by 100, and then prove to me if it's going to be multiplied more or less? Can you? How can you set up an experiment to prove that people stay in Jannah forever and not just for 100,000 years? Set up an experiment. Faddal. How would you do that? You can't. So it's in and of itself, it is unintelligent to try to use science to prove things of the next world or things of the unseen, or to even try to prove, I don't know, whatever it is, anything, all the stuff that people are saying today. That's the first. These are the first things we want to lay out, that we've got the different sources of knowledge. And it's for the believer to mix the two together. And there are many examples of that where you can fill in blanks because you have knowledge from the other source, which is revelation. Any questions so far? Because I don't know if I should just move on, or do we need to go more in depth? And that will be determined by if we have questions or not. So the sources of knowledge. Then we have the means of acquiring knowledge, and these are the senses. So I can learn by touching something. I know it's soft, furry, smooth, rough, hot, cold. Senses. Or I can smell and learn. And I can hear and learn. And I can see and learn. And so I've got the senses. And that's exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. Allah brought you out of the wombs of your mothers not knowing anything. Blank, zero in here. Right? Nobody comes out knowing physics and stuff. Everyone comes out, they don't know anything. Then Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned some of the senses, not all of them, some of the senses which He gave you through which you can وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Then He gave you hearing and eyesight and minds so that you may be thankful. So He mentioned some of the means through which you acquire knowledge. The point I want here is, sometimes also you find people give too much power to the brain. Philosophically, if it doesn't make sense to me, it's nonsense. If I don't get it, it must be garbage. But Islamically, the philosophy is nicer. The mind is one of the means through which you acquire knowledge, one of the senses called here. So, and just like it's ridiculous to try to pick one of the senses to learn everything. Yani someone says, I will only use my sense of smell to learn everything. No touch, no bus, this one. Something soft or furry, I'll tell you. Doesn't make any sense. Why? Because each sense has a limit. And the mind also is limited. And that's really fair. To try to make the mind like this super thing that comprehends everything. No. So the scholars, Islamically, philosophically, the mind has its limits. Cannot grasp everything and fathom everything and imagine everything. And when you know that, you can understand the concept, but not fully wrap your mind around it. You can understand the concept, but not fully imagine it, and it doesn't make it a nonsensical concept. And I have an excellent example. It's the only one I have. I'll use it. Imagine or understand this. Inshallah, when you walk into Al-Jannah, you're going to see amazing things. And you're going to see amazing colors. Then you're going to see a color that is a brand new category of color. It's not a mixture of two earthly colors. It's a completely brand new color. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Yes? All right. Now, since you all understand it, close your eyes and see that color. You see the difference? Now, the fact that you cannot close your eyes and imagine that color, does that mean my first question was nonsense? Because your mind couldn't wrap itself around it or imagine it or completely fathom it. Does that mean the concept is nonsense of a brand new color? No. And so, anyways, and this comes into play with other things when people will ask you a question about Allah Azza wa Jal. They'll ask you a question about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. No, you understand what that means. Like if I ask, who is the first one who walked into this masjid this morning? Like today on Friday, who's the first one who walked in? You told me it was Brother Abdul Alim. All right, fantastic. Right, Brother Abdul Alim was the first one to step into this building today. So someone asks you, yes, but who was there before him? So no, listen to me. Abdul Alim was the first one who walked in today. Yeah, but there had to have been someone before him. But do you not understand what first means, yani? So Allah is al-awwal. وَلَيْسَ قَبْلَهُ شَيْء. There was nothing before him. I understand that, but who was there before him? What I just tell you. Now, I understand what the first means. I've seen firsts on earth. But then you hear, okay, Allah has no beginning. All right, that I don't get. How He has no... Do you understand what it means has no beginning? You understand the concept. Shukran, Zakul Khair. You understand what it means to have no beginning. You understand that concept. The fact that you can't wrap your mind around it doesn't make the concept nonsense just because you can't imagine that. Yeah? And on that note, a quick explanation of one of the ways we understand Allah Azza wa Jal is we use our world to understand Allah Azza wa Jal. We look to our world to understand Allah. One of the ways. يعني مثلا, someone tells you Allah is the most merciful. I look to my world. I've seen mercy. I've seen mercy in the animal kingdom. I've seen mothers give mercy to their children. My parents gave me mercy. So now I multiply that a lot in my mind and I understand how Allah is the most merciful. Allah is generous. I've seen generosity. I've seen it with my friends. I've seen it with family members. I've seen it with... So now I understand generosity. I multiply that a lot in my mind and I understand how Allah is the most generous. Every time I see a description of Allah, I look to my world. I find a much smaller scale of that. I multiply it. Now I understand. So then they tell you Allah was always there. He has no beginning. I turn to my world. And what's the problem now? Allah has no beginning. I turn to the world to find an example of that. And do I find one? No. So that's also part of the problem, like the way We try to understand Allah as using our world. So then when it comes to things, descriptions that don't exist in our world, like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's because you're in this world where everything has a beginning, so you cannot fathom it, but you understand it. And here's the good news. You just have to believe it. You don't have to explain it. All right? You don't have to give us a mathematical formula for it to make it to Jannah. You don't have to. To make it to Jannah, you just have to believe Allah is the first. To make it to Jannah, you have to believe Allah created you. Not the science behind how He created you. And that's the good news. All right? All right. طيب. Very good. Let's get to answering questions about Islam. I always talk about these different techniques of answering questions. So, people are always going to, for the rest of your life, people are going to ask you questions. Muslims, non-Muslims, those who want to challenge you, those who are sincere and sincerely want to know. Children will ask you questions. How will you answer and respond to those questions? So, from the Da'wah workshop, we've got 6 different techniques of answering questions, and they kind of make your life easier. And for the most part in life, you have to give the simple explanation first. Most of the time. Very rarely do you have to go in depth with someone. Most of the time it's simple analogies, simple stories, simple comparison. They get it, they move on. All right. The first technique we call the flip side of the argument. When someone asks you a question, flip it around, and they will immediately see what's wrong with their question. All right. When someone challenges how Allah did things or how Allah created things, flip it around or ask them, how would you like it to be? There's no way they're going to present something better than what Allah did. True? Let's take some examples. Start with a true story. I was working at this company. There was a non-Muslim. There were a lot of Muslims in it, and there was one non-Muslim co-worker. And he tells me, I want to ask you a question. Why is it that Muslims always grow their beards? And I want to flip it, right? So I said, that's actually a very good question, but I actually don't grow it. It just comes out by itself. Yeah? And you know what I mean? Like, I don't put manure and go out in the sun. Hey, honey, you see anything? It just comes out by itself. So I said, because when a male matures, he naturally develops facial hair. So even if a child draws the face of a man and a woman, the child will add facial hair to the man's face. So it's a natural thing, so I don't grow it. It just comes out by itself. Now you might think, that's kind of not an intellectual answer. Most answers don't have to be intellectual. Very few things are intellectual in this world. Everything is just basic. So the guy says, look how blown away he was by this silly answer. He goes, you know what? You're so right. Wait, it gets worse. He goes, I shouldn't ask you why you grow your beard. You should be asking me why I shave. Because I was explaining to him it is natural for it to grow. What is unnatural is to insist upon removing every stubble of hair and cutting myself in the process and then adding the cologne. And then I look in the mirror and I go, ah. Why do they always go, ah, after the shaving commercials? Anyways, so flip it around, okay? Another example, like some people ask this. I didn't ask to be created. I wasn't consulted. Allah created me without consulting me. طيب, let's flip it. So what would you have liked? That Allah will ask you first, right? Okay. طيب, when He's asking you, you get it, right? So He would have to bring you to existence and then ask your permission. Can I bring you to existence? Now when you think about it, now it doesn't make any sense. He's going to bring you to existence to ask, how can I bring you to existence? And then you'll think, no, send me back to where I came. There are a lot of things. So many things wrong with that, right? And by the way, how do you know that if you came into consciousness for the first moment and you felt life and consciousness and being present, how do you know that anybody would choose, let me go back to nothingness? How do you know that? Maybe 100% of humanity would have chosen to be alive and exist, So maybe even that question, this is in the unseen of Allah Azza wa Jalla, maybe even that question is so ridiculous because maybe everybody would have chosen to exist as opposed to being nothing. But the point is this. This is the exact or the very essence of the relationship between the Creator and the creation. That if He has to ask you, can I create you? How is He the Creator with all the power? If He has to bring you to life and say, hey, is it okay with you if I bring you to life? You have the choice. No, that's the very essence of the relationship that the Creator creates. And He doesn't consult. He doesn't consult people, do you want to exist or not? That's the whole point. But only sometimes when you flip it around do they realize, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And again, if you heard these examples, bear with me, because I've been using them for many years in the Dawah workshop. But the other one is, it's a true story. It was like an MSA event, and just like this, there were men on one side and women on the other side. And then this lady just walks in screaming, interrupting the lecture. And she's like, why are they covered like that? And of course, everybody knows the Muslim women, they're covered because the men made them, right? They're oppressed, they're forced. And so she comes in, she's going to free you. Don't you love these white people who are going to liberate you? So she runs in, she's screaming in the middle of a lecture. And that's also very gutsy. Imagine there's some Hindu lecture and you just run into the Hindu association. Hey! So gutsy. But, you know, she's a freedom fighter. She walks in, she's woke. Hate that word so much. Hate it. So she comes in and she's like, why are these women covered like that? And then the sheikh goes, well, he says, you were born without clothing. Why are you covered? She was shocked. So she goes, modesty. He goes, okay, modesty. More modesty. And that was the end of the story. She turned around and walked out. Because if you're saying I'm covered out of modesty, if I logically extend that argument, that means the more I cover, the more modest. And the least I cover, the less I cover, the less modest. And also, if you think being covered is oppression, that means the more uncovered, the more liberated you are. And I see that you're right now not fully liberated yourself. So why don't you fully liberate? Don't use that argument, but it's an argument. When you flip it around, they realize, okay, what I said in the beginning didn't make much sense. So sometimes people ask you a question, flip it around. And you can use it anywhere if you want, if it's applicable. Someone says, I don't understand why bad things happen to good people. I say, okay, listen, sometimes good things and sometimes very good things happen to very bad people. Yeah, guy robs a bank, shoots the security guard, gets in his getaway car. Then the cop car crashes, he gets away with the money. Here's a good thing that happened to a bad guy. So flip it around. But my favorite flip, and I get this all the time. Why do bad things happen to good people? Okay, listen. I want you to flip the whole concept in their mind. How much intervention would you like to see? Yani, you're a good person, nothing bad should happen to you. You slip, it's a rainy day, you slip on the sidewalk, suddenly there's a big pillow, king-sized, mattress underneath you. Guy's falling off his roof while he's working on his roof in the weekend and his family is there. There's a huge king-size mattress suddenly that shows up underneath him. So how much intervention would you like to see? Every time there's a calamity, why do children die in earthquakes? Okay, how about the earthquake happens, all the old folks die and the children are just sitting there. Now I have to find them homes and stuff. So the world you're describing is al-Jannah. And I recently had someone in Ramadan, he thought he was so smart in Ramadan, came to my office, was like, if God is good, why so many bad things happen? I said, Habibi, listen, what do you want to happen? You give me a list of what you want to happen and not happen to people. And then in the end, I told him, what you're describing is paradise. We're on earth. Okay? Here, you slip and fall, you get caught, bad things happen. And then the world you're waiting for, that's the one you should be working for. That's the one when you go to Jannah, nothing bad happens. Flip it around, he'll realize, hey, I got it all wrong. I was waiting for Jannah. All right. I'm aware of the time. Let's move on to the next technique. So, using facts. Sometimes people ask you a question. You can use numbers, you can use science. Not a big deal, nothing wrong with that. And you always make sure that you keep it a good mix and don't keep it flexible also. Like sometimes people will rely on one thing too much. Every question you ask them, they tell you a story. Yet once upon a time there was a man. I asked you a fiqh question. For God's sake, just tell me, halal, haram, let me get going. Once upon a time there was a duck who مش عارف. So using facts, like for example, we used to always use this. People would say, oh, don't talk to me about religion. More people die because of religion than anything else on earth. Okay, that's not true. Like, where did you get this from? numbers, not statistically what, they're just completely untrue. And I can throw some numbers at you, and you will find that what you just said is completely not true. World War I, how many people died? History major? I can tell. Yeah, I mean, some of the low estimates are like 25 million people. World War II, the estimates go anywhere from 50 to some as high as 65 million people. Okay? Then you've got all these civil wars in America, the 100 Years' War, the Prussian War, Napoleon, all these wars. How many of them were because of religion? Like Scripture said, kill the other guy just because he's the other guy. Tell me one war that started like that. The guy was sitting in a religious place and reading his scripture, and it said, "Oh, I've never seen this verse before. It says we have to kill the other guy just because they're the other guy." So, how many wars were completely because of a scripture that said, "Go do that," versus how many wars started because of something else, money, land, politics, and then religion was brought in? Even if you look at the Crusades in Europe, they brought religion in to get more people to join the army. And it worked so well that they weren't even equipped to feed these soldiers, and many of them died from starvation. They had things, they drew pictures of Muslims desecrating Christian sites, and people got so upset and joined the army. All right? But the point is that, and I always use the example, my wife is Palestinian, I always use the example of, there are many Palestinians in New York City, many Jews in New York City. How come the Jews in New York City don't go and bulldoze the apartments where the Palestinians live? Or is there anything in Judaism that says destroy the Palestinian home? Or is there some other thing added on to the conflict or to the issue in Palestine? There's something else. Anyways. But you've never had a conflict so factually it's wrong. Factually it's wrong. It's like the joke about the guy, his plane crashed between two tribes that are at war. So they captured him and they said, "We're going to take you to our leader. Are you a spy? Are you one of them?" He said, "Wallah, I'm not." They said, "We're going to take you to our leader. He will test you." They took him to the leader comes out. He says, "One question. Your life depends on it. Are you with us or with them?" The pilot says, "I'm with you guys." He says, "I was just testing you. We are them. Kill him." "أنت معانا ولا معاهم?" قال "أنا معاكم." قال "إحنا هم." اقتلوه. Anyways, fine. So, the point is, using facts, numbers. You can use scientific studies, but to refute something, you don't have to always use an ayah. And I know some da'wah workshops, they insist that you have to link everything back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or whatever. That's not a rule, it's just a suggestion, right? So you can use numbers sometimes, a person will be completely quiet. You can use facts, you can use, like something about, that study that came out and said, well, it's done by a non-Muslim professor. He said, if Islam is violent and Islam commands violence and violence against non-Muslims, then we should expect to have very high crime rates in Muslim lands. So he looked at a couple of Muslim countries, and it was far less than even those high Western countries. نازلين يذبحوا في بعض يمين وشمال ويطلعونا احنا All right, people. So, sometimes you need to explain the bigger picture. Explain the bigger picture, all right? So someone will ask you a question, and they don't get the bigger picture. And once they get that, it makes sense. True story. A guy asked me. So he's like one of those people just born with a Muslim name, doesn't know anything about Islam, and even eats pork. And when someone eats pork, they went too far. Because you've seen Muslims who consume alcohol and whatever, but then they give them ham. Like, ham? No. Right? So he said, I have a question. And he was genuine. He said, why does Allah care what I have for breakfast? And he means, in other words, doesn't Allah have bigger things to look at? And I go to the restaurant, I choose McPorky from the menu. Why does Allah watch and care what I chose from the menu? And it's $1.99, I paid, khalas, akaltu, and I move on my day. Then he says, shouldn't Allah just care if I kill someone, if I lie, if I, do something like, why does He care what I have for breakfast? So what he's missing, if he understood the bigger picture, everything else would fall into place. So, So I told him that the mechanical like movements of choosing something from the menu and handing over $1.99 is very simple. But it comes under a bigger umbrella, and that is obedience to your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can use so many different analogies here, which is another technique, right? But if you're at work and the phone rings and your boss says, do not pick that up, and you just pick it up and say, hello. The boss is like, didn't I told you not to pick it up. You're fired. You're going to argue like, I don't understand. I only picked the receiver and only traveled like not even 2 feet. And it's not like I spoke to him forever. I just asked one innocent question. Hello. Can you make that argument to say the movement was simple? I don't understand what the big deal is. The big deal is you disobeyed your boss. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلْ الْأَعْلَى. We don't compare Allah to His creation. Or the chauffeur, the big shot, the billionaire is in the back of the limo or whatever. And he tells Jeeves, make a right. Jeeves makes a left. Didn't I tell you make a right? It's Austin and traffic is bad. Why'd you now it's going to take us an hour to correct this mistake. Right? So he says, but sir, instead of turning the steering wheel this way, I still turned it, but just this way. It's the problem. Or someone is in court for murder in front of the judge and like, Your Honor, it's not like I strangled him and kept squeezing and then his face went from, pink to red and then to purple and then I saw the life. I just squeezed the trigger. It was not even a fraction of a second and he was dead. You think the judge will be like, oh, in that case, you're free to go? The judge. So don't argue that, oh, the action was so simple. The lady said, good morning, welcome to McDonald's. How may I help you? I said, can I get the McPorky? It'll be $1.99. And I left. You don't just add a lot of air to your voice and make it innocent. All right. So once they see the bigger picture, they understand the big deal. Yeah, it's easy to pick a pork from the menu and eat it, and you won't die, and you won't get trichinosis. Yeah, you can have a normal day if you eat pork in the morning. True or false? Yeah? False? And if you eat it, what will happen? You're going to be like, then you'll turn into a zombie. Wow! Start biting people in salah. Then they'll bite other people. Then the imam will be like, nothing's going to happen. Yeah, but what's the big deal then? The big deal isn't the action. The big deal is the bigger picture. And isn't that the case with sins anyways? Right? The action can be simple. Stealing an item is easy. Slipped in my pocket, not even a split second. Nobody saw anything. Yeah, but what's the big picture, bro? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you that's haram, forbade that. You disobeyed Him. You didn't care that He's watching. All these crimes piled up under it now. All right? So when people understand the bigger picture, they get the idea. And that's why you always start with what is important first, even in da'wah as a rule. Because I always say, if someone doesn't understand that 1 + 1 = 2, they're not going to get that c² = a² + b². They're never going to get that. One time a coworker was telling me, and she thought she was smart, okay? And she was an atheist. So she wasn't smart, we already know this. So she goes, and she's trying to ask me right from the middle, kidda. And they give you this look like they're like, are you really that dumb? So she was telling me, you really believe that Muhammad rode a winged horse? Yani nonsense. How are you gonna? So first of all, I don't know what winged horse. You're talking about the buraq. Buraq doesn't have wings, so. But I asked her, do you believe in a God? She said no. I said that's the problem. And if you believe that there is a Lord who created the universe and all the planets and everything in it, and then He created the animals with wings and animals with fins, animals with 4 legs and bipedal and with no legs. If there is such a being, He can, just like He created these categories, mix the two. He could put wings on a horse, even though He didn't, but He could put wings on a horse and a horn on a horse, bardo. Flying unicorn. Doesn't get cooler than that. Okay? So, but your problem is you don't have the big picture first. So we don't start answering that question. We go back to the big one and say, okay, first leave the horse aside. Let's make sure there is a God. We talk this out, and once you know there is a God, you'll believe that there is a horse and a fish and a chicken. Don't worry about the animal kingdom. It's not hard at that point. All right, so what do we get? We got using facts. We've got the flip side of the argument. We've got What's the one we just did? Huh? The bigger picture. Explain the bigger picture. All right? We've got also starting with the simplest explanation first. I don't know why we just love the complex answer first. It makes you look smart, right? So we go with the fancy one. One time in class, I asked somebody asked you, why do bad things happen to good people? Bad things happen to good people. A guy put his hand up. He said, a non-Muslim asked you this question. And I'm not making this up. The guy puts his hand up and said, I will explain that there are two types of the irada of Allah Azza wa Jal. There's al-irada al-kawniyah. So you took an Aqidah class, learned these terms, like I can't wait to show off with these terms. And then John stops you in the street like, well, look, there's irada al-kawniyah. Okay? So, always give the simple explanation first. And it works. And everybody gets it. The intellect understands it. The intellectual person understands it. The simple-minded person understands it. Everybody gets it. I knew this one guy is insane da'i. I've never until today seen anyone even close to this guy. Unbelievable. But he's got the same simple speech and he repeats it to everybody. Homeless people in the street, professors, memorized it. It's the same speech. But he gets so many shahadas from college professors, more than anyone else I know in this world. This guy. And he gives them the same simple explanation. And one of the worst things in the world is a person who doesn't use big words, when they try to speak like a person uses big words. Oh, man, it's so cringy. Huh? So cringy. You always have people like that. I'm like, well, according to the dictation of the... dictation mean, but fadahtan, you embarrassed everybody, man. You just embarrassed all of Bangladesh and you're not even Bengali. All right, people. So, always start with the simple explanation first. Always start with the simple explanation. All right. We used to use, and there are many examples of that. Maybe we'll use them. Aywa?
What was the speech that he gave?
Who is this?
The guy that you're talking about.
Oh. You know something? You wouldn't believe how effective his speech was. And every day I see him, he's like, oh, I got 7 shahadas yesterday. Oh, 6 shahadas the day before. And then like, oh, I got 3 shahadas today. I'm like, we just woke up. You know, how do you do that? And one time, him and another buddy, they went to a university and they lost count. One day, they had a da'wah table and they lost count at 65. In one day. He said, so it's probably 74, 75. He said, I don't know. We lost count after 65. So that's those guys, that's the crew that I used to hang with in DC, right, where I learned the techniques from, right? And just improved upon them immensely, that's all. I'm kidding. All right. Then you've got, so maybe after Isha I'll throw out a little bit of though. I got 2 more, let me finish them. If there's time, maybe we'll do it. But I appreciate that you're curious, like, hey, let's use that technique. I like it. Yeah? Using stories. Sometimes you can answer a question with a story. And even scholars, some big scholars in Islamic history, they would tell a story involving animals. And they're saying this to adults, but to send a specific message or to give a specific explanation. Now you might be saying, okay, like I can understand some of these 6 techniques that you're using, but I don't necessarily see all of the applications. And perhaps when we do Q&A after Isha, as I answer, we'll say, okay, which technique was that? And you can see. Using stories to explain whatever, a question, a concept, you can use a story that will explain it. You can use analogies. That's the 6th one. Okay, using analogies. And analogies work they just save you so much time. I was walking with a friend of mine after class. We were walking to the parking lot. The sun was out. It was during the day. And we were talking to him for a long time for him to become Muslim. So he said, if God is so good, why is there so much evil in the world? I said, and this is a true story, this is exactly what happened. I said, if I hand you a clear plastic jar right now, or glass jar, if I give you a clear glass jar right now, could you give it back to me with darkness inside, full of darkness? What do you think he said? He said, oh, I get it. Khalas. That was the end of the story. I didn't have to tell him, al-irada al-kawniyya, but that's simple. He said, I get it. Then you can explain more if you want. And I told him, yeah. So that's exactly how it is. We have the light of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? And you cannot have darkness while there is light, because darkness only exists due to the lack of, or the existence of light. When there's no light, you get darkness. Okay? So when people don't follow the guidance of Allah, they don't follow the light of Allah, then you get evil in the world, you get murder, you get kidnappings, you get all these kinds of things. But that's all it is. And that was enough for him. Because people try to blame the evil that happens on Allah Azza wa Jal. And people always do that. And you'll meet people who made the worst decisions, and like with their own finger poke their own eye out, and then they tell you, I don't get why God is doing this to me. I'm like, okay, since you sat down here and started going through the disaster that you call your life. All right, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be, okay, let me be nice. Let me get into nice mode. So like every decision in this story was completely yours. God didn't do any of this to you. But people just love to blame it on something, someone else. All right? But, all right, bye, inshallah. You know, I'm like skipping some of the political environment changed too much. We used to use some of these examples very freely. Like now we have to be all careful. All right, anyways, let's see. What are some of yes, let me throw one more thing since we have a few minutes. Okay, this is the age of Aisha radiallahu anha. So the age of Aisha, in a sense, I kind of answer it using the flip side technique, where we ask them what they prefer. But the bigger problem is that it is due to ethnocentrism, where the belief that your culture is inherently superior to the other culture. Every country in the world, every society is guilty of this. They believe that their way, their culture, their values are inherently superior to the other. Sometimes within the same country, this tribe believes, or this people from this region of the country, they're better than the other people in the other region. And right now in this room, it is loaded with ethnocentrism. Because the Pakistani brothers believe that they, culturally better, superior than the Bengalis. Afghanis think better than the Palestinians. No, the Pakistanis. Arabs think better than everybody. This group thinks better than everybody. And all of them are wrong. The Sudanese are the best. Okay? So, but everyone is guilty of it. And in America, we're guilty of it. Every country is guilty of it. But here's the problem. So every country has it. Every group has it. They believe that their way is superior and inherently better. But when that nation is a strong nation, the weaker nations start to think their way is better also. You want to understand why? Because there are a lot of good things in America. We all live here. We know there are a lot of good things here. And then there are some things that are not good. And then sometimes you travel overseas and you see they left the good and they took the not good to emulate. So, Habibi, of all the things in America, you took this garbage you want to emulate and bring here to Islamabad? What about all the other good things? You just took the worst. So that's why they do that. Because a stronger nation becomes it's appealing to the others, and whatever their way is, we start to feel it's better than our way. The point behind that is the question of the age of Aisha. That's all it is. It's ethnocentrism. I believe the values that we have today are so correct, so good, so superior, that not only do I have the right to question an entirely different nation and culture based on our values today, but I'm going to go back in time 1,400 years ago and ponder as to why people who lived 1,400 years ago in a different part of the world didn't adopt the same values that we recently adopted today in America. Do you see how ridiculous that question is? No? Nobody sees that? You say, let me explain. Should I explain it again? Someone is saying, why didn't they in Arabia 1,400 years ago use the same values we have today in America in the 2000s? Why don't you ask America 150 years ago, why didn't they have the values you have today? You understand? All it is ethnocentrism. So, okay, fine. Let's just get to this part. Someone comes to me and says, and this is what I use every single time someone asks me this question. why is it that your Prophet married a young girl? My answer is, how old would you have liked her to be? Flip it. And what do you think they say? What number? 18. Bas. No creativity, nothing. Bas 18. All right. طيب. So then when he says 18, so why? Is there anything scientific about 18? Is there any study proving 18? How about 17 and a half? Would you accept? Sometimes I fool around with him. How about 17 and a half? Like, yeah, I'll accept that. طيب. 17. 16 and a half. And then until he stops. Like, why did you stop there? And what is that based on? So there's no study. By the way, do you know part of where we got the 18 from? Anybody? So Aristotle, for no apparent scientific reason, said the woman reaches the peak of her life at 18. And the man reaches the peak of his life at 37. Kattar khairak. That's like the only thing we have about 18. Like there's no study or science or anything that says 18 is when the woman reaches the peak at 18 and the men start peaking at her at 18 also. Single brothers know what I'm talking about. They're at their peak performance. The shaitan tricks people, you know. Well, in Islam, you're allowed to look at your fiancée. She's not your fiancée, Habibi. She's just a girl walking down the sidewalk. She could be. No. Next time, let's speak about marriage. How to find a spouse. Do you know how much I hate that topic? Hate it. Don't like to talk about that at all. All right. What was I saying, people? What were we saying? Aynam, why 18? So, how old would you have liked her to be? Whatever number they give me, is there any science, any study, anything behind that? No. So basically all it is, and by the way, do you know it's not even 18 in America? Google it. Not even 18 in America. We just think, in America you can get married at 18. La habib. You can get married at 15 in America. You can get married at 16. You can get married at 17. As long as your parents sign off. You can get married anywhere in America at 16 as long as your parents sign off. And it's a few states where you can get married, you can marry yourself off at 18. And a lot of states, you can marry yourself off at 17. Most people don't even know that. They live in the state and they think it's 18 because it's just a number in our head. Some states still, 16, you can marry yourself off. You can go and get married by yourself without your parents signing off. So no one said 18 is the age when you should get married. The law just said, for no apparent reason, 18 is the age when you can get married without your parents' consent. But 17 also, and 16, and even there's one state that I believe that's still 15. Okay? Probably Alabama or something. Anyways. Huh? Arkansas, something with an A. Alright? The point is that if you want to go science now, you're going to have a tough time. Because if you go science, what are we talking about for marriage? You really need two kinds of things. One, you need physical maturity, and you need psychosocial or mental maturity. Right? So, as far as biology, why would Allah make it so that a girl can reach menses by the age of 10, for example, or 11? And the fact that she is now biologically able to have a child, you know, if you speak to doctors, there's only like one issue, but it's easier to have children as you're younger, and it becomes more difficult as you get older, right? That's why your mother's always rushing you. Get married quickly, get married. Khalas, I'm 23 for God's sake. Wow. When you hit 30, khalas, right? No such thing. The point is that. So, the biology says the younger they are, the easier it is to have children. The older they are, the harder it is to have children. The only little thing against the young mother is that the pelvis bone is not enlarged enough for the baby to pass through easily. But the question is, why would Allah make it so that an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old is able to have children? So if you want to argue biologically, you can't argue because she reached menses. That means her body is physically mature. She can have a child. So then we have the other argument. That is up here. Psychosocially, is she mature or not? Because if she isn't, then, well, let me explain a couple of things. First of all, nobody in the room, am I right, is saying 12 or 13-year-olds should get married. Am I right? Nobody, not a single one of us thinks a 13-year-old should get married. Unless you're 14, then you probably think so. All right? But because we're not even saying that anymore. Why do we not agree with that anymore? Because we're saying the world has changed. The world is so complex now that you need to go through years and years of schooling to be able to understand the world that you live in. But what if I take you to a tribe today in the desert? A nomadic tribe that lives in the desert. And in that world of theirs in the desert, and moving from one spot to another in the desert, if a woman knows how to cook, all right, and sew or whatever, she knows everything a 70-year-old living in their village or in their camp understands. He knows just as much as a 70-year-old. If the young boy who's 15 knows how to hunt, build his weapon, skin the animal, bring it, and put the tent up, he's just as knowledgeable as the 80-year-old man in the village. Now, in that community, they don't have 401ks, they don't have internet, or all this other stuff that will liberate you. Okay? So now you go visit them, you with your cameras, okay, and your stuff, and you see that there's going to be a marriage. You're like, well, what's all the dancing for? Oh, there's a wedding. Shalakhbukh, who's 15, he's marrying Shalikhlakh, she's 13. There's going to be a marriage between a 15 and a 13-year-old. So, what's your role now? Is there a problem with this marriage? No. Because in that world, they know everything they need to know. She's mentally mature, she's physically mature, he can take care of a home or a tent in this case. وخلاص. So now you go to a group of people who live in the deepest, darkest jungle, and there's a wedding between a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and you use American standards. No, we're not going to have any of this. This is not. They'll cook this guy and eat him for the wedding feast. Yeah? Anyways, so the idea is that, and of course, this is even a recent thing, the idea of 18-year-old is when you can get married, or besides that, you shouldn't get married. This is a new value, a recent value that we have. Because we had people who were, getting married, like, not even 100 years ago, we've had a statesman who married a 13-year-old. And look at the Queen Elizabeth, this is of in English history, and how many of them were 13 and 14 when they got married. Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, how old were they? Huh? Yes, a story about a 15 and a 14-year-old. Oh, hubbun, we're going to die together. Today, you can solve the Romeo and Juliet, smack the boy, go to your room. You, go to your room. Finished. Wala Shakespeare, wala Romeo and Juliet. Done. You're grounded, little lady. Oh, I hate you, Mom. Finished. Wala Romeo, wala Juliet. Khalas. See? But, so it's not even our value, it's a recent value that's not based on anything, but we believe it is so correct that we have the right to go back in time to another part of the world and say, why didn't you use the same value that we have today? I have never used this technique on anyone, and it didn't work. Because, khalas, what do you want? The only thing is, you think your system is the best, your values are the best. That's why aren't your values like our values? That's it. And we're not even pro a 12-year-old getting married today. But if they're going to do it in that nomadic tribe in the desert, congratulations. Khalas, none of my business. That's all it is, really. We've got like 4 minutes or anything. Anyone have any question or? All right. So I always tell people, you're not going to be impressed because of you being outside the box and the person you're talking to is inside the box. So you say something that will not impress the Muslim next to you because they've known it their whole life, but to them. So he would basically, believe it or not, you'll be surprised. This guy's amazing, I'm telling you. I've never seen anyone like him. And all he talks about, the 3 questions of the grave and the hellfire. And I'm telling you, he specializes in professors. He's insane. And all he talks about is, because at the end of the day, that's what people are concerned about. He can falsaf until the sun sets. But at the end of the day, he's scared for himself. And when he knows he's going to die, and he wants to make sure he goes to a good place. So this guy, he's just got this crazy rhythm and is smooth. And he just talks about the punishment of the grave and the hellfire. Then he talks about Allah's rights upon us. He's got this whole speech that he just goes through. And more or less the stuff that I cover in the Dawah workshop covers that kind of the stuff. And I know this is not what you were like. You were like, oh, great, I'm going to get 7 tomorrow. But that's it. But he's got this style, and he talks in this way, and he tells people about what will happen when they die, because that reaches everybody. Nobody's going to be like, I don't care, I'll deal with it then. So Allah Habibi, do with it now. And sometimes people start to get, I've had people like that. In Canada, there was this guy, and I was telling him, you need to, if we're talking about eternity in the hellfire, eternity in Al-Jannah, then it makes a lot of sense for you to dedicate time right now to find out if Islam is the truth or if it's not, so you can move on. He said, no, I'll just deal with it later. So are you telling me that you wouldn't invest any time now? And if the consequences are really bad later, you'll deal with it later? It's like, yeah. Like, do you do anything in life like that? He said, yeah, he's now being dumb, right? So I said, look, Habibi, and everybody knows, if I tell you there's this room, if you go in, it's highly radioactive. You will get cancer for sure. Look, I'll deal with it later. No, he won't. No, he won't. And that's why a lot of times you use these analogies of dunya and people just wake up. Alright? Maybe more examples after the salah, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for listening attentively. Sallallahu barakatuh. Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan, barakallah feekum. Takbir. Takbir. We have 1 more minute until the Iqamah. Before then, we have a quick announcement from Nueces Mosque.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm sure by now, most of us know what Sustainers is, and if you don't come to the masjid enough. No, I'm joking, astaghfirullah. Sustainers is a program that we started a few years ago to make donating and fundraising more accessible to our general congregation. It's a monthly customizable donation amount that can be set and modified based on however much you're able to give at that given point in your career, in your life, etc. And after poetry night, a lot of people came up to me and they said, look, man, I want to donate, I want to sustain, but I just don't have a job right now. Like, I just can't afford to sustain. And I said, dude, I know. That's the whole point of Sustainers. That's why there's an option there to give $1 a month, right? It's completely customizable. You can give $1 a month or $1 million a month. And never think that your donation is too small. Because, yeah, practically $1 a month, one guy, that's $12 a year. That's 2 packs of water bottles. But if 100 people give $1 a month who otherwise wouldn't even have considered donating, that's $1,200 a year. That's the water bill for 3 months. That's significant. And to be completely honest, the goal of Sustainers isn't for us to raise funds. The money's going to come either way. We'll figure it out. The goal of Sustainers is to establish a community rooted in generosity and love and support for the masjid. Right? Our goal isn't to raise funds. That's the byproduct. But we're doing it to extend the virtues of sadaqah to our congregation. Sadaqah has virtues that the Prophet prescribes that are insane. Right? On the Day of Judgment, the charity that you give, the sadaqah that you give, comes back to you as a shade. So if Nueces Mosque has been a place of solace, a place of comfort, if you've benefited from any of our programs, go ahead and scan the QR codes that we're going to be passing around before or after Isha and sign up for even $1 a month. And inshallah, I pray that our contributions to Nueces or to any other organization come back to us as a shade on the Day of Judgment. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.